I'm going to start my 10 minutes now. So we have laid out what we consider to be the most logical approach to explaining how a particular company would issue their next security offering digitally, and some key partners and ecosystem that are required. And again, this is happening now. This is not later, next year, in the future. The companies and the people who invest in this space now early will capture the most value. This is technology, and it's a marriage of technology and capital markets. So just as a quick background, InvestaCrowd has invested in 25 private equity deals. We've had about 12 successful exits. We were one of the first companies here a couple of years ago at the first wave of online investment platforms, crowdfunding P2P. And we realized in the digitization of private equity that all the private equity issuers are going to need the same thing. They're going to need key infrastructure. They're going to need these rails to issue, raise capital, and for secondary trading of these investments, as well as a bunch of other services. So that's our key focus. These are the groups that we serve. There's a couple of, there's many people actually everyone in this room is in one of those kind of 6 buckets. So I just want to give you, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly because again, we've got 10 minutes and we're literally giving you, a couple of years of knowledge into each speaker into a little 10-minute package. So this is really important. And again, we're focused on the private markets, but a little brief history of the public securities. But speakers are meant to stay here because the camera's watching you, so I can't walk around. So it's actually debatable, but what many perceive as the first sort of public offering was this 1602. The Dutch East India Company did the first joint stock company, and they used to raise money to buy boats and trade, and that used to be one individual, and to share the risk, they came up with this concept of joint stocks for a company. What happened was it grew into the biggest company in the world. You can see it equaled today, if you try to apples comparables, the same value as like 20 of the biggest listed companies we have today. So it also ended up doing a few evil things, but the point was it dramatically changed the capital. And then what it led to was, again, this is debatable, but what many perceive to be the first stock exchange, which was in Amsterdam. This is where these, the stock ticker I believe was VOC, these are where these VOC stocks traded. Now that was back early in the days. What's important about it was we did things with pen and paper. And the volume, and you can see the ticker tape, which was developed in about 1870, so more people could see the stock trades faster and invest more. They still actually used to drive around on bicycles with the share certificates afterwards and try and settle it. And then we eventually got to NASDAQ and the e-securities, where we had, again, a new evolution of technology match and mirroring the volume and quantum of growth of capital going into this space. Many things in the world have been built via companies and capital raised through the public market. So this is an example of what technology did for a big sector of the world. Why is that important? Because in the digital evolution of securities markets, the public markets took a few hundred years to get to e-securities, and the private markets haven't done anything. So why are we here? We're here because there's really been no evolution in how we invest in the private equity deals for 419 years. We've jumped ahead, 2020 next year. But this is incredible. What an opportunity. All we've been able to do is come up with faxes, scans, emails, so we've moved that paper faster, and we actually have come up with digital signatures, DocuSign, HelloSign. I refuse to sign anything on paper anymore. I have for a while. But this is the opportunity. And the private markets are much bigger than the public markets because it's everything that's not public listed. So it's incredibly exciting. So what is digital security? What's most important? It's the regulated financial instruments that we all know about. It'll be a digital representation of those shares on a distributed ledger or a distributed database. We'll try and boil it all down. It can be public, open to everybody, or it can be private. So private equity groups can issue a digital security and control who accesses it, who sees it, who's allowed to trade it. All of this is possible today. And again, some of the speakers after me will explain what they do, what their businesses do, and they'll show you how and when it operates. So incredible changes, and ultimately what the stock exchange was a ledger. And the ledger created this huge flow of capital, but you still needed these intermediaries and settlements and clearings and DTC, and you don't even really own your own shares. But And I give a bit of a shout out to Bruce Fenton, who shared those stories with me before. But again, it's what's held it back is the ledger. And we now have this new technology that digitizes the ledger, which removes the need for a lot of the intermediaries in the middle, a lot of the often called rent-seeking intermediaries, but it really is going to allow trading for investments that were just not tradable before. And that is, the lion's share of the private equity marketplace. So as an example, let's focus on mid-market real estate private equity funds. So people raising $50 to $250 million. Here's the pain points. 60-70% of these groups don't even hit their targets on average. So this is average. Some of these guys are spending much longer than this, a year and a half, 2 years, just to raise the money. That's an incredible amount of time. The fund life cycle is usually pitched at 5, 6, 7 years with a couple of extensions, but actually some of the research shows that some of these funds go on to up to 15 years. So that's an incredible amount of time to have your capital locked up in an investment. They're very illiquid, which is why if you want to sell your shares in these private equity groups, and there's some people in this room that work in that space, and that's why they make a lot of money, because if you want to sell out of your shares, you've got to take a huge haircut. So, and this also damages the investor relationship. If you have to sell your shares for whatever reasons and then you have to take a big haircut, you're not going back to that issuer anytime soon to give him any more money, no matter what anyone says, because you feel like you kind of got ripped off. There's also misaligned compensation structure with this antiquated 2 and 20 model, 2% management fee and 20% of profit. I could talk about that all day long, but I've only got 3 more minutes here. So this slide basically just shows that the increased, for different types of asset class, as you get higher forms of liquidity, investors have to pay for that with a lower return. So what we're proposing here as a simple mindset is, what if you could get the private equity investment returns and marry it with the characteristics of publicly listed traded elements, and you have actually the best of both worlds. Now, again, if we talk about real estate-backed digital securities, people often say, is that a public listed REIT? And we say, well, not really. What it is, again, taking the best characteristics of a public listed REIT and marrying it with the best characteristics of private equity. And you'll see here that this world has to be built out, but what's interesting about a real estate digital security offering, you could do single asset, you could do debt, you could do equity, you could do a basket of goods, you could do development projects. Publicly listed REITs are great. Some of our REIT friends are here. But anyone who knows who's in that, you need a huge basket of real estate, huge capital to do that, a lot of other elements. But the market has proven appetite from investors for institutional liquid real estate. But the return ends up being about 5% annually, give or take. Private equity returns, well, most of the private equity guys in the room would attest to this, they're not getting out of bed for less than double-digit returns. So again, if you can bring a lot of these elements that people like, obviously the markets that are being built around it, and marry it with the new technology, you effectively have the best of both worlds. We actually have a license application under application for our secondary exchange for trading digital securities backed by private equity and real estate right now. So we think this is completely game-changing and very, very exciting. So we think we now have, and again, there's many elements of what we consider to be the benefits of why you issue digital securities. You have cost of administration benefits. Anyone who's tried to change a shareholder out in the paper world knows it takes months if it happens, lots of fees, lots of costs. So that's one component of it. The other component is you have new innovative investment structures that are possible. And ultimately you have enhanced forms of liquidity and secondary trading, whether that's OTC trading on a broker-dealer platform or whether it's actually trading in an exchange. Many, many, many benefits. So obviously you need both sides of that equation, and we're really excited to be working on some projects with some of the leading issuers where the benefits are really for both sides. It's not going to work if the one side takes it all, the issuers won't issue, or if the issuers have cranked up the metrics against the investors, it's not going to work. And this is now, again, now possible with the latest technology. So with certain partners in the room, we built what I call digital investment banking solutions. So we can take, because one thing that people forget, if you want to issue a digital security, you still have to do everything you did before. You need to get lawyers and tax, and you've got to get your package, you've got to put your PPM together, you've got to get all that ready. Then you have to come to groups like ours to help you digitize that launch that and have a place for it to secondary trade. So don't be confused that the purpose of the digitization, you're not buying digital, you're buying the security. But the digital becomes this amazing enabler. And that's why the industry's had such a difficult birth, because the technology was born in cryptocurrency land, and then it rolled across to these initial coin offerings. The first wave of digital securities, which most people called security tokens, were failed ICOs or startups that don't necessarily need this system. And now we're having a clear separation this year with groups like ours, but much bigger groups like Mizuho Bank and JP Morgan implementing their first use cases of the latest technology. So we really see this seismic shift. I think we're in the #1 jurisdiction on the planet for this. The MAS is aggressive, I call it kind of aggressively supporting, trying to look at how to adjust rules to make way for the latest technology, and it's already underway. The MAS and SGX have been trialing blockchain exchanges for years. The banks are on top of it, and it's really being led. Even the ASX in Australia is like, I'm Australian, but so far behind the 8 ball on tech. Even the ASX is doing something. So it's really interesting time. So I leave you just with one last message, which is, you know, there's multiple cases in a very recent history of industries and companies that died because they did not change. Blockbuster, Kodak, a whole bunch of other companies. So, you know, the digitization of securities is a given. It's much better for a government to issue 10,000 new funds and companies digitally, which they're all going to do. Delaware, Wyoming, Thailand, they've already put signals out that they're going to get there. So right now it's up to private companies to help digitize existing shareholding structures, but very soon we'll see the removal of paper from these issuances, and instead of talking about digital securities, we'll go right around back to just talking about security offerings again. But right now we're going to talk about digital securities. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming. I hope you have a great morning. I'm going to pass it over to Alice.